The mop hit the marble floor like a whisper, soft, methodical, forgotten. At 5:12 a.m. The corporate law firm of Brightwell and Morrow was still asleep. The city outside yawned with early traffic and honking horns, but inside this towering glass cathedral of suits and secrets, only one man moved. Amir Dowd, age 47, wore a faded blue jumpsuit with his name stitched in peeling white thread. He didn't mind. Nobody called him by his name anyway. To most, he was the janitor. But back home in another life, he was a civil engineer, a husband, a father, a survivor of war. Now, he was just a man with a mop and a silence that hid stories no one cared to ask about. On this particular morning, Amir stood by the towering windows on the 42nd floor, looking out over Manhattan like it was someone else's dream. He didn't speak of the sunrise. He didn't whisper prayers. But in his chest burned a quiet defiance that no floor wax could erase. Behind him, the elevator dinged. He turned slightly, just enough to see Eleanor Carter, senior associate, heels clicking, eyes buried in her phone. She didn't see him. She never did. No one ever did. They treat him like furniture, whispered Jamie, the youngest intern. 2 hours later in the break room. I swear I've worked here 3 months and no one even knows where he's from. They don't care, shrugged Marcus, a paralegal. He's a refugee, right? Probably doesn't speak English. Amir, standing just outside the door cleaning the vending machine glass, heard every word. He spoke 5 languages. English was one of them, but he didn't flinch, didn't correct them. He just wiped. That afternoon, Eleanor slammed a file onto her desk and cursed under her breath. It was her 3rd failed attempt to crack the infamous Barnwell contract dispute, a $1 billion case against a pharmaceutical giant, accused of corporate negligence. 10 lawyers, 3 months. No one could untangle the web of contracts written in legalese and layered deceit. What am I missing? She muttered, fingers in her hair. As she stormed out for coffee, a document slid off her desk and floated like a feather to the hallway. Later that night, Amir found it. He didn't mean to read it, but he had been trained, years ago, to read structure the way musicians read music, even contracts. He scanned the page and then paused. His eyes narrowed. He flipped a page, then another. His fingers stopped. His breath caught. They were looking at it all wrong. The next day, Eleanor came, and early only to find her desk spotless, organized, and that contract neatly stacked with a post-it note on top. One line, written in tidy block letters. Clause 13 contradicts Section 4. Follow the liability trail through Appendix D. You're missing the indemnity trigger. No name. No signature. She blinked. What? She showed it to Marcus, then to James, then to Mr. Brightwell himself, and slowly, like a rumor under office lights, a question began to spread. Who the hell left that note? When security checked the cameras, all they saw was the janitor placing papers on the desk at 6:04 a.m. No one asked why. No one wanted to admit what it meant. But Amir just kept mopping. That evening, a new memo circulated. All personnel must wear visible name tags including janitorial staff. Amir pinned his back on. It still read, Amir. But this time, someone read it. Eleanor stared at the badge, her brow furrowed. Wait, you're the one who, before she could finish, the fire alarm blared. People screamed. But Amir, he ran toward the smoke, toward the 43rd floor. Where a locked server room was burning, and no one had the key. The alarm shrieked like a banshee through the Brightwell and Morrow building. Red strobes bounced off glass walls and panic echoed across every hallway. Staff scrambled out, heels clattering, ties flapping, phones forgotten. But Amir didn't move. Like the others, he moved with purpose. Like a man who had seen fire before and didn't fear it anymore. He took the emergency stairwell, 2 steps at a time. Floor 43. The smell hit first burning plastic and melting wires. Then came the door. Locked, heavy, no window. He didn't hesitate. From his janitor's cart, he pulled a flathead screwdriver, jammed it under the panel, popped the metal with a grunt, and rewired the lock in less than 20 seconds. The door burst open. Inside, the server room was suffocating in smoke. Sparks rained down from a blown circuit box, the central rack, where most of the firm's case files were digitally stored, blinked erratically seconds from collapse. Amir dropped to his knees, yanked off his jacket, and crawled under the heat toward the main terminal. He reached behind the backup unit, found the kill switch, I powered it down manually just before the surge hit. Silence. Lights out. But the servers were safe. By the time fire crews arrived, the danger was over. Who shut it down? A lieutenant asked. Janitor, said a junior associate, breathless. I think he's from Turkey, or maybe Jordan. No, someone else whispered. I heard Syria. He fixed the Barnwell file, and now this? Heads turned. Rumors spread faster. Then fire. That night, Amir sat alone in the boiler room, his unofficial office. It smelled of rust, bleach, and old memories. He rubbed a scar on his forearm, remembering a night not unlike this one, long ago. A night where he pulled his daughter from the rubble of their apartment in Aleppo. A night where he couldn't save his wife. America was supposed to be a second chance, but for 3 years, it had just been survival. Until now. The next morning, Elena Carter waited for him by the elevators. When he arrived, same faded jumpsuit, same calm face. She stood in his path and simply said, Amir, right? He nodded. She held up a folder. I want to show you something. They rode the elevator in silence to her office. She closed the door. I don't care what HR says. I know that note was you. She placed the contract on the table, open to Appendix D. Her fingers tapped it. You were right. Amir said nothing. How did you see what we couldn't? He finally spoke, his accent soft but clear. Because I've seen contracts used to destroy lives, not just protect them. Elena tilted her head. Law background. He shook his head. Engineer. Structural. I used to read building blueprints. Now, I read legal ones. They both collapsed the same way under pressure. She stared at him for a long beat, then smiled. I want to hire you. Amir blinked. To clean your desk. No, she said. To consult. HR didn't take it well. Not possible. They told her. He's not cleared. He's not credentialed. He's a janitor. Elena pushed back. So was Goodwill Hunting. Credentials don't solve billion-dollar cases, brains do. They threatened to report her. She didn't flinch. By the end of the week, she had Amir working unofficially on contract reviews off the books, midnight sessions, back office. No one could know, but someone found out, and that someone wasn't happy. One evening, a black Mercedes pulled into the underground parking lot. Out stepped Victor Morrow, co-founder of the firm and Elena's direct boss. He was not the kind of man who liked shadows. He was the kind of man who controlled them. He walked into Elena's office without knocking. She was reviewing a case file with Amir standing at the window. Victor's eyes narrowed. What's he doing here? Elena stood, helping. Victor's voice dropped. You're risking everything. For what? A refugee? Amir spoke, calm and deliberate. I've been called worse. Victor turned to him, eyes cold. You're not a lawyer. No, but I see what you don't. Victor stepped closer. This firm was built by the law, not janitors, not refugees, not sympathy. You want to throw away your career for charity? Amir didn't blink. No, for justice. Victor laughed once sharp, dismissive. We'll see how long that lasts. He walked out, but as the door shut, Elena whispered, I think we just declared war. The mood in the office changed like a shift in weather, subtle, then sudden. First, it was the whispers. Did you hear Elena's working late with the janitor? Then came the stares. Amir felt them, daggers behind cubicles, glances in elevators, silence that hummed aloud in meetings he was never supposed to be in. But he didn't flinch. He'd been stared at before, in refugee camps, at immigration offices, in shelters where hope went to die. Brightwell and Morrow was just another hallway of locked doors. Only this time, he wasn't cleaning them. He was opening them. One night, as snow tapped the windows and the city below blurred into a sea of yellow cabs and broken dreams, Elena handed Amir a USB drive. This, she whispered, is the real problem behind the Barnwell case. It's encrypted. 10 partners tried. No one cracked it. Amir took it gently, almost reverently. I'll try. You'll try. He looked up. I don't need credentials, just time. The next 3 nights, Amir barely slept. He worked his janitor shift until 6 a.m., then returned at noon with thermos coffee and a refurbished laptop. In the boiler room, his fortress of solitude, he dissected code line by line. It wasn't just encryption. It was misdirection, fake indexes, false trails. But Amir had learned long ago that systems, like people, had patterns. They always repeated themselves when scared, and this system was terrified of being found out. On the 4th morning, He walked into Elena's office, pale but smiling faintly. I cracked it. She froze. What? He handed her a printout. Inside was a file marked Woolridge Memo Number 11, Internal Risk Brief. Elena's eyes scanned fast, lips parting as she read. Projected mortality rates exceed 38% in test group B. Recommend continuation under NDA cover. Risk management suggests low probability of legal exposure if classified as voluntary trial. Prepare standard indemnity packages. She looked up, hands trembling. They knew. Amir nodded. They tested a drug that wasn't safe and kept going. They buried this. Yes. She sat back in her chair. This is criminal. This could bring the whole firm down if they were complicit. Amir didn't answer. She knew he didn't have to. That afternoon, Victor Morrow summoned Elena to the 45th floor. The conference room had no windows, just leather chairs, low light, and partners with eyes like sharks. Victor gestured for her to sit. She didn't. You've been working with unauthorized personnel. He began. I've been solving the case. You've been compromising the firm. Elena placed the memo on the table. Explain this. A beat of silence. Then, that file is stolen. No, she said. It was hidden. There's a difference. Victor leaned in. You have no idea what you're doing. Elena's voice cracked. Not from fear but fury. 10 people died in those trials. Real people. Your solution was NDA letters and payouts. Victor tapped the table. You think justice matters here? Justice is what you buy when you can afford the best argument. You don't change that with janitors and morals. She grabbed the file. I'm taking this to the media. The room went silent. Victor smiled. You'll be disbarred. Then, disbar me. She turned to leave. Where's the refugee? Victor asked. She paused, right behind me. Amir stood at the doorway, quiet as ever, but something had changed. He wasn't a shadow anymore. He was the storm that followed silence. The next morning, the firm's servers went down. Documents missing. Client folders corrupted. Internal memos deleted. Someone had triggered a fail-safe protocol. Victor claimed technical malfunction, but Elena knew better. So did Amir. They had one chance left. Take the evidence public before it vanished completely. Only one person had access to both the digital architecture and the building's old maintenance tunnels. That led to the secure server backup system in the sub-basement built decades ago. Before the firm went digital, that person was the janitor. Most people at Brightwell and Morrow didn't even know the building had a sub-basement. It wasn't listed in the new floor plans. The elevators didn't go that low. You had to find the old maintenance hatch behind the generator room, next to a fuse box so outdated it still used ceramic switches. But Amir knew. He'd studied every square inch of the place, not because he had to, but because that's what engineers do. They see weakness in foundations. And this firm had been built on one that was cracking from the inside out. Elena met him at midnight by the back stairwell. She was wearing jeans, a hoodie, and running shoes. Nothing like the sharp blazers and courtroom confidence people were used to. Are you sure this is safe? She asked. No, Amir replied, but it's necessary. They moved through the service tunnel, guided only by a flashlight and Amir's memory. Pipes groaned above them, dust swirled in the beam of light, and the air grew heavier the deeper they went. At the far end, hidden behind stacked paint cans and decades of neglect, was a locked metal door with a rusted keypad. Elena stared. You knew about this the whole time. Amir didn't answer. He just typed in a code. The door clicked. Inside, the room was cold and humming. Steel shelves lined the walls, filled with magnetic backup drives labeled by month and year. The analog backups, the last resort. This is where they keep the dead files, Amir said. Dead? Anything too dangerous to delete outright. They bury it here, just in case. Elena's fingers brushed one of the drives labeled Q for the 2022. Barwell, this could prove everything. Amir grabbed the drive, careful, like handling evidence in a murder case, because that's what it was. Murder, hidden behind legal shields. The next challenge, getting the files decrypted and backed up offsite before Victor or his tech team realized what was missing. They had 48 hours. Elena reached out to a trusted journalist at the Herald, someone who owed her a favor. Meanwhile, Amir reached out to someone else, someone he hadn't spoken to in years. His brother, Tariq, once a software developer in Damascus, now a mechanic in Queens, and a genius at data recovery. Tariq arrived the next morning at Amir's tiny apartment. He looked older, tired, wearing oil-stained overalls. Last time we talked, you said you were done with all this, Tariq said. Amir looked him in the eye. They think we're janitors, ghosts, but we can expose them. Tariq smiled. Always the hero, huh? No, Amir said, just tired of watching liars win. The brothers worked for hours, bypassing corrupted sectors, rebuilding index trees, and decoding hidden logs. They found internal emails executives at Barnwell discussing payouts to silence families, clinical trial photos that were never supposed to leave the lab, and audio files of conversations between Brightwell lawyers and Barnwell executives. The worst file was titled, Asset Containment, EC. Elena Carter. She listened in silence as Amir played the recording. Victor's voice was unmistakable. If Elena becomes a problem, we trigger the clause. She signed a non-disclosure in 21 during the Harris case. We'll spin it as retaliation. Another voice asked, and the refugee, Victor, no record, no identity. He disappears, no questions asked. Elena's hands balled into fists. They were planning to destroy us. Amir looked at her. Double quotes, no. They were planning to erase us. The time had come to strike back. Elena met with the journalist in a park, away from cameras. She handed over a full dossier, decrypted drives, printed memos, copies of the backup logs. He read silently, eyebrows rising higher with every page. This could blow up 3 corporations and one of the most powerful law firms in the country, he said. I know. They'll come for you. Elena's voice didn't shake. Let them. He stood. You just started a war. Back at the firm, Victor Morrow stared at his phone. His expression darkened as he watched the breaking news alert flash across every screen in the building. Barnwell whistleblower case exposed. Files link corporate executives and top law firm to suppress deaths in clinical trials. The article named names. It quoted files, and it closed with one sentence that made Victor's blood run cold. According to anonymous sources, the leak came not from a lawyer but from a janitor. Victor slammed his fist on the desk. Find him, now. Amir didn't show up to work the next morning. For the first time in 3 years, the floors of Brightwell and Morrow stayed dusty. Trash bins overflowed, and the lobby plants wilted under fluorescent lights. Some whispered he'd been fired. Others said he ran. But Elena knew better. He was hiding. Because now they were hunting him. By noon, internal security had already swept his locker, his cart, and the boiler room. They found nothing. No files, no laptop, no forwarding address. Victor paced his office, rage boiling beneath a mask of calm. I want his immigration file. He barked. Get ICE involved if you have to. Threaten Homeland Security. I want leverage. I want fear. The HR director hesitated. Sir, if we involve federal agencies, this could escalate. Victor's eyes burned. It already has. Meanwhile, Amir was in a public library in Brooklyn, surrounded by people who didn't know his name, didn't care about headlines, didn't see him as a liability, just another face in the crowd. He logged into a temporary server under a false IP. Every file Tariq had decrypted was now securely backed up in 5 locations, including one in Switzerland. He wasn't just hiding. He was preparing. Elena, on the other hand, was out in the open. She knew what she was risking by staying visible, but she also knew the system. If she disappeared, they'd win the narrative. Instead, she booked appearances. She spoke at panels, gave interviews, released redacted documents to the press. Her name trended on Twitter. Half the country called her a hero, the other half called her a traitor. And in the middle of it all, a man in a jumpsuit became a symbol. They started calling him the janitor ghost. But symbols make enemies. Late one night, Elena's apartment was broken into. Nothing was stolen, just rearranged. A toothbrush left on her pillow, the TV remote in the freezer, her front door left slightly ajar when she knew she locked it. A message the next day. A black SUV idled outside her building for 3 hours. She didn't call the police. She called Amir. He answered on the second ring. You're being watched, she said. I know. He replied. You need to leave. No. She paused. Then, what are you going to do? His answer came without hesitation. Finish what I started. 3 days later, a sealed manila envelope arrived at the office of the New York State Bar Association. Inside, the full, unredacted audio of Victor Morrow's instructions to suppress whistleblowers, along with the corresponding legal documents. outlining how Brightwell had shielded Barnwell through manipulated arbitration. Attached to the envelope was a simple note: if the law can't protect the innocent, maybe it can at least stop protecting the guilty. No name, no signature, but the message spread like wildfire. Victor's empire began to crack first. A senior partner resigned, then another. 3 corporate clients issued termination letters within 24 hours. Investors pulled out. Board members panicked. The firm's stock, yes, they were publicly traded, tanked. Victor stood at the top of the Brightwell building, staring out over the skyline he once ruled. And for the first time in 20 years, he looked unsure. But Victor Morrow was not the kind of man who accepted defeat. He made a call, not to the police, not to lawyers, to someone who specialized in cleaning messes that janitors couldn't touch, a fixer. Private, ruthless, invisible. Name? The voice asked. Victor hesitated, then said it. Amir Daoud. The fixer spoke calmly. Where was he born? Syria. Status? Refugee. No paper trail past 22. No family listed. No assets. Then he's already gone. No. Victor growled. He's still fighting, and he's winning. The line went quiet for a second. Then, not for long. Meanwhile, in a small community center in Queens, Amir sat beside his daughter. Yes, his daughter. NOUR 16. Smart. Fierce. The one reason he kept breathing. He had kept her hidden all these years, registered under a different surname, living quietly with friends of friends. Now she looked at him, her dark eyes full of worry. They're coming, aren't they? Yes, Amir said softly, and reached across the table, took his hand. Then let's make it count. The story had gone global. Headlines blared across the internet. Refugee janitor exposes billion-dollar cover-up. The man who outsmarted 10 lawyers with a mop and a flash drive, anonymous hero, or national threat. But while the world debated whether Amir was a whistleblower or a security risk, he and her lived between breaths in the quiet space where survival meets strategy. They moved apartments twice that week. Tariq helped secure burner phones, encrypted USBs, even fake IDs. Amir was sharp. She picked up everything fast. She had her father's eyes and, it turned out, his mind. What's the plan? She asked one night, cross-legged on a mattress on the floor. Amir was sketching diagrams on a pizza box. Victor won't stop. The firm is wounded, but he still has allies, judges, executives, lobbyists. They leaned forward. So we go after the people who protected him. He paused. She was just a kid. She shouldn't have had to say that. But maybe it was time. Maybe she was ready. Back at Brightwell and Morrow, Victor Morrow faced his own battlefield. The fixer had already started his sweep, scrubbing digital traces, intimidating journalists, buying time through fake countersuits. But none of it was working, because Amir hadn't gone quiet. He'd gone strategic. New evidence was leaking daily, each piece more damaging than the last. Emails linking pharmaceutical reps to campaign donations. Photos of Brightwell board members at research facilities off the books, financial transfers between shell companies coded in ways only someone trained in system infrastructure could have decrypted. They tried to trace the leaks. Every IP bounced off 5 countries. Every account expired after one upload. It was like chasing the ghost. Then came the public hearing. A congressional subcommittee launched a formal inquiry into the Barnwell trials. And they wanted testimony, not just from Elena. From the source, from Amir. He hesitated. I go public, he told Elena. They'll arrest me before I finish my first sentence. Then we go with you, she said. You don't understand, Amir said, voice low. They won't just ruin me. They'll use everything: my refugee status, my past, my daughter, anything to discredit me. They already tried, and they failed. No, they haven't really tried yet. 2 days before the hearing, Nur was walking home from school under a different name, with a different backpack, in a different neighborhood. But the SUV parked at the corner looked familiar. To familiar, she kept walking, but faster now. The SUV followed. She ducked into a bodega, heart pounding. Called her father. They found me, she whispered. Amir didn't panic. He prepared for this moment. Get to the safe spot. I'll come to you. Nur moved fast down a service alley, through a back stairwell in a building she'd never entered before. 10 minutes later, she was in the crawl space of an abandoned laundromat, heart still thudding. When Amir arrived, he pulled her into his arms and held her like she was made of glass. I'm sorry, he whispered. Don't be, she said. Let's hit them harder. That night, he uploaded a video, face blurred, voice distorted, but unmistakably him in it. He laid out the full timeline, his arrival in the U.S., his job at the law firm, the Barnwell files, the cover-ups, the threats. The fixer, the sub didn't ask for pity, he asked for truth, and millions listened. It went viral in under 12 hours. Amnesty International shared it. So did whistleblower protection groups, refugee advocates, and public interest law organizations. Even a few members of Congress retweeted it. Victor saw it on his phone while boarding his private jet. He smashed the screen, but even broken glass couldn't stop what was coming, because the court of public opinion had just opened its doors, and Amir had been called to testify live on national television in person. His lawyer tried to talk him out of it. You have every reason to stay hidden. We can do this via closed session sealed deposition protection program. But Amir shook his head. If I hide, they win. If I'm afraid, they erase me. He looked at her. She needs to see me stand. The hearing room in Washington, D.C. was packed beyond capacity. Cameras lined the back wall. Journalists shuffled their notepads. Security agents stood like statues at every corner. At the center sat a simple wooden chair with a microphone, and into that chair walked Amir Dowd, wearing a black suit borrowed from a neighbor, the sizes too big. Sleeves rolled once at the cuffs. No security detail. No legal team flanking him. Just a man with nothing left to lose and everything to say. Eleanor watched from the second row, heart hammering against her chest. Noor sat beside her, gripping the edge of her seat, whispering words under her breath in Arabic, not prayers, math formulas. It calmed her. The chairman cleared his throat. Mr. Dowd, please state your name and current occupation for the record. Amir leaned forward. My name is Amir Dowd. I am, or was a janitor. A ripple of laughter moved through the room. Confused and uneasy. Amir didn't smile. He continued. I worked for Brightwell and Morrow for 3 years. I mopped floors, emptied trash, cleaned up the remains of power. Now, the room quieted. I also uncovered evidence that your justice system had been sold to the highest bidder. He laid it out like a man telling bedtime stories made of glass and broken bones. The encrypted files, the trial deaths, the audio recordings, the threats, the hidden daughter. The fixer at one point, a congresswoman asked gently, Mr. Dowd, why didn't you go to the police? He looked her in the eye. Because I came from a country where uniforms meant danger, and in America, I watched lawyers in better suits bury the truth. So no, I didn't trust anyone with a badge or a title. A long silence followed. Then a question from another member. Why risk your life? You had no legal obligation, no protection. You're not even a citizen. Amir paused. Then answered, because I have a daughter, and I didn't want her to grow up in another place where silence is safer than truth. The hearing was scheduled for 2 hours. It lasted 6. By the time it ended, the internet had already exploded. Hashtag Amir Dowd trended across platforms. Journalists called him a symbol of integrity. Refugee organizations called him a testament to resilience. One senator simply called him the man we should all aspire to be. But for every cheer, there was a warning. Victor Morrow was silent, but not gone. That night, Eleanor found an envelope taped to her apartment door. Inside, a photo of her standing next to Amir at the courthouse. And a note. 1 bullet, 2 traitors. 3 seconds. She didn't scream. She just picked up her phone. Amir, she said, that escalating. I know. He replied, it's almost over. Almost. Yes, we end it tomorrow. The next morning, Amir showed up at Brightwell and Morrow. No disguise. No weapon. Just the mop handle from his old cart hollowed out, and now holding a USB drive welded inside the cab. He walked through the revolving doors as if it were any other. Shift. Security moved to stop him, but Victor Morrow himself appeared from the elevator lobby. It's okay, he said, voice calm, eyes cold. Let him through. Amir stepped into the lift. Victor followed. They rode in silence to the 45th floor. The executive suite. No cameras, no witnesses, just 2 men. Victor walked to his desk, poured the glasses of whiskey, and offered one. Amir didn't take it. You embarrass me, Victor said. You disgrace the law, Amir replied. Victor downed his drink and chuckled. You think you've won. I think I've told the truth. Victor stepped closer. But truth doesn't matter here. You still don't get it. I built this place. Every stone, every loophole, every NDA. I own judges. I fund campaigns. You think a refugee with a flash drive and a martyr complex can bring that down? Amir finally stepped forward. I don't need to bring it down. He reached into the mop handle and pulled the drive. I just need to make it visible. He set the USB on the desk. This holds every backup copy, every file you tried to erase. It's already been copied to federal investigators, to the media, and to your competitors. Victor's hand twitched. But this one goes to the people who worked for you, the interns, the assistants, the night crew, the people you never saw. He looked Victor in the eye. You didn't just build a firm, you built an army of ghosts. And now, they've turned the lights on. Victor stood motionless as Amir turned and walked away. He didn't stop him. He couldn't, because for the first time in Victor Morrow's life, he was irrelevant. The next 48 hours felt like an earthquake under the legal world. The Bar Association announced an emergency ethics review of Brightwell and Morrow. Federal investigators issued subpoenas. Former clients began filing lawsuits, class actions, malpractice, even wrongful death. And then came the betrayal Victor never saw coming. One of his own partners, Leonard Briggs, CFO, flipped. He turned over internal communications, bank records, offshore accounts, even private memos that proved Brightwell's senior executives knew about. The clinical trial deaths long before the first NDA was drafted. In one damning email, Victor had typed the words, "Let the janitor mop it up. He won't even understand what he's looking at." That line headlined every major newspaper the next morning. Amir stood on the platform of the Queens subway, watching the city pass by like a living organism. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't celebrating. He just breathed. Next to him, Nerline, her head on his shoulder. "Are we safe now?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "No, but we're seen. That's the first step." In an upscale Manhattan restaurant, Elena met with two women, former paralegals from Brightwell, who had been silenced years earlier by settlements and threats. Now, they were ready to talk. One of them cried through half the lunch, "I thought no one would ever believe me. I thought I was crazy." Elena took her hand. "You weren't crazy. You were alone. That's different." She passed them copies of the files Amir had recovered. "You're not alone anymore." Meanwhile, Victor Morrow prepared for the only fight he had left, survival. His assets were frozen. The board voted to suspend him. His face, once seen only in high-end finance circles, was now meme fodder online. They called him the man outlawed by a mob and the king of NDA letters. But Victor still had one card to play. He knew where Amir had come from, and more importantly, he knew what the U.S. government could do with that information. A confidential file landed on ADH's desk the next morning. Inside, a tip about inconsistencies in Amir's asylum process. An anonymous source claimed he had possible militant ties. False, of course, but when power feels cornered, it weaponizes systems that don't ask questions. Amir was arrested at 6:14 a.m. No warrant, no explanation. Nor watched from the doorway, frozen in shock, as her father was handcuffed by two agents and pulled into an unmarked vehicle. He didn't resist. He just met her eyes and nodded. Elena got the call 20 minutes later. By the time she reached the federal holding facility, Amir was already marked for expedited review. Translation: deportation without trial. "This is insane," she shouted. "He testified to Congress. He saved lives. You can't just disappear him." The agent shrugged. "We're just following a directive." "From who?" "Silence," she stormed out, already dialing her press contacts. The story broke before noon. Whistleblower janitor detained by DHS. Is this how America treats truth? From hero to target, the rest of Amir Dowd. Public outrage exploded. Protests erupted outside the courthouse. Elena went live on national news. This is not about borders. This is not about protocols. This is about silencing someone who challenged the powerful and embarrassed them in front of the world. This is about revenge. That same day, Nur sat before a camera in her bedroom. She was trembling, but she pressed record. "My name is Nur Dowd. I am 16. I was born in Aleppo. My mom died in a bombing. My dad brought me to this country to survive. He never broke a law. He never hurt anyone. He mopped floors while you walked past him. And now you call him dangerous because he told the truth." The video went viral in under 3 hours. Even celebrities shared it. Refugee rights organizations launched a legal defense fund. A federal judge issued a temporary stay of deportation. Amir was still in detention, but he wouldn't be flown out of the country that night. And Victor watched the fallout from his penthouse. Sipping whiskey alone, his fixer had failed. His influence was fading, and Amir was becoming untouchable. Not because of laws, because of people. Amir sat alone in a white room with no clock. Just for walls, a fluorescent light, and a thin metal table. Time had lost meaning. Meals came and went. Sleep was shallow. Dreams were worse. But what kept him sane was the sound of chanting, faint, distant, but real. Through the small window, he could hear voices from outside the DHS building. Dozens of them. Sometimes hundreds. Chanting his name. Free Amir. Free Amir. Meanwhile, Elena transformed from lawyer to full-time crisis commander. She gave interviews, coordinated volunteers, partnered with human rights attorneys, and organized a media campaign called #Not One More Silence. She worked on 2 hours of sleep a night. She didn't stop. Neither did her. The teenager became a lightning rod for the movement. Her speech at a university protest went viral. My father came here to clean your buildings. Now, he's cleaning your conscience. The crowd erupted. The video hit 20 million views in 48 hours. Victor Morrow watched it all unfold from a temporary office in a corporate bunker. His own firm had frozen him out. His name had been stripped from the website. His assistant had resigned. His fixer had disappeared. And still, he had one last play. He reached out to a senator, an old golfing buddy, with a favor to cash in. If you can push this through, Victor said, I'll fund your next campaign and everyone after. The senator agreed, but not everyone on Capitol Hill still played Victor's game. That week, Congress scheduled a follow-up hearing, not just about Brightwell and Morrow, but about abuse of federal enforcement. To retaliate against whistleblowers, they called new witnesses, journalists, legal experts, even ICE officers who admitted they'd been pressured to flag Amir's name. Under national interest concerns without evidence, the hearing went live. Americans watched with open mouths as the machinery of suppression was laid bare, and one question echoed across the country: what are we doing to the people who tell us the truth? Then came the twist no one expected. A former Brightwell intern, quiet, overlooked, long gone, stepped forward with an internal compliance memo she had secretly downloaded months ago. It showed that Victor had initiated an internal campaign to collect dirt on Amir the moment the Barnwell file leak went public. The document included line items like locate immigration inconsistencies, identify vulnerable family connections, leak past addresses anonymously, planned anonymous letters to DHS via proxy law firms it was intent to silence. Written in legalese. And it was the final nail. The Department of Justice launched an investigation into Victor Morrow personally. An arrest warrant was issued. They found him trying to leave the country through a private airstrip in upstate New York. When agents approached him on the tarmac, he didn't fight. He just raised his hands and said he was just a janitor. And one of the agents replied, not anymore. That same day, Amir was released. He stepped out into the sunlight, blinking like he hadn't seen it in months, because he hadn't. The crowd erupted. Reporters shouted. But all he heard was one voice, Baba. Ran into his arms, and he folded around her like a shield, like a home. Elena stood nearby, tears in her eyes. You did it, she said softly. Amir shook his head. No, we did. Within a week, Brightwell and Morrow collapsed. Clients fled, partners resigned, lawsuits mounted. The firm filed for bankruptcy protection. And in its place, a new movement began. NER launched an initiative with Elena called the Janitor's Justice, a legal aid foundation focused on empowering whistleblowers, immigrants, and low-income workers silenced by the system. Their mission, to give a voice to the invisible. In an interview weeks later, Amir was asked if you could go back and stay quiet, would you? He paused. Then smiled gently. I used to mop floors to erase footprints. Now, I leave them. 6 months later, the world had changed, not in headlines, not in sweeping legislation, but in quieter, smaller ways. In boardrooms where HR departments now had to listen, in courthouses where janitor no longer meant irrelevant, and in schools where students studied the case of Amir Dowd as a symbol of civil courage. The man, once invisible, now had a name that stood for something. In downtown Manhattan, the same tower where Brightwell and Morrow once rolled now had a new tenant, the Janitors. Justice Foundation. To floors, 20 employees. No corner offices. Elena sat at her desk near the open workspace, flipping through a letter from a single mom in Ohio. She'd stood up to her boss about workplace abuse because of Amir's story. She wrote, "I realized my silence was part of the problem. Thank you for showing me I wasn't crazy or alone." Elena passed the letter to Amir, who was quietly reviewing case files at the next desk. He read it, didn't speak, just nodded. And know you were walked by with a stack of intake forms. She'd skipped college for now to work full-time for the foundation. She wore jeans, sneakers, and a hoodie that said "Truth Mops Power" in bold letters. "We got 3 new whistleblowers this week," she said, dropping the stack. Amir smiled. "Good," then paused. "But we need to move carefully. Their lives will never be the same." Nur looked at him, older now in the eyes than her 16 years should have allowed. "They already know that, Baba. That's why they came." One of the cases hit too close to home. A Syrian-American truck driver in Detroit, wrongfully terminated after reporting unsafe practices, accused of agitation, labeled ungrateful, facing deportation. And know you read the file in silence, then placed it in front of Amir. He recognized the story immediately because it was almost his. They took the case, filed a civil rights complaint, wrote a press release. And this time major media outlets answered the phone. Because now they listened. Meanwhile, Victor Morrow was still awaiting trial, out on bail, living under tight restrictions, his passport seized. His reputation was gone. His assets were frozen. His name, once synonymous with dominance, now conjured images of arrogance, greed, and downfall. An investor blog titled him "The Man Who Lost to a Mob." He tried to sue for defamation. The judge dismissed it with prejudice. In a TV interview, a journalist asked Amir, "Do you forgive Victor Morrow?" He thought long and hard. "I don't forgive what he did," Amir said slowly, "but I forgive what made him believe he could." The journalist blinked. "Meaning, power convinces you you're untouchable, that people are disposable, that justice is negotiable. But it's not." He paused. "Justice isn't a system. It's a choice. You choose to see people or not." That same week, the mayor of New York presented Amir with the Community Hero Medal. It wasn't gold. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. And when Amir accepted it, standing on the city hall steps with Nur beside him, he didn't speak in English. He spoke in Arabic. And Nur translated, "This medal is not for me. It's for every person who thought they were invisible, every immigrant, every janitor, every girl afraid to speak, every boy told to stay in line. You are not furniture. You are not noise. You are not background. You are the reason the world moves, and we see you." The crowd erupted. Eleanor wiped a tear. And in a crowd of hundreds, someone held up a sign, "Let the janitors lead." That night, Amir sat in his apartment. Same worn couch, same flickering lamp, same quiet. But the silence felt different now. Nur curled up beside him, reading a book. Elena typed notes on her laptop. Nearby, they often stayed late. He looked at them both and said, "You know what I miss?" They looked up, mopping floors. Nur laughed. "Why?" He smiled. "They don't lie." Across the city, a boy in a public school library watched a video of Amir's testimony. He was 12, brown skin, big eyes, quiet. He turned to the librarian and said, "Can janitors really change the world?" The librarian smiled. "Apparently, they already have." 12 months after the scandal broke, a ripple had turned into a wave. Congress passed the Whistleblower Shield Expansion Act, offering increased protection for non-citizen informants. The bill was unofficially nicknamed Amir's Law. Legal blogs called it one of the most important anti-retaliation policies in decades. But for Amir, laws were never the goal. Visibility was. In a courthouse in Atlanta, a Honduran janitor stood up during a labor abuse hearing and handed over hidden camera footage of employer threats. When asked why he came forward, he simply said, "Because I read about the Syrian guy who did it first." In Los Angeles, an Afghan refugee exposed a corrupt landlord who had been scamming dozens of undocumented tenants. In Detroit, a cafeteria worker filed a class action suit over illegal wage deductions. In Portland, a mailroom clerk shared evidence of insider trading at a tech company. They were immigrants, custodians, clerks, delivery drivers. They were people no one used to see. Now, they were following the mob trail Amir had left behind. Back in New York, Amir was quieter than ever. The spotlight didn't seduce him. He didn't want fame. He didn't want awards. He wanted peace. But that wasn't so easy, because when you become a symbol, you also become a target. Victor Morrow finally stood trial. The courtroom was full. The prosecution painted him as a manipulator of the legal system, an orchestrator of silence, a man who twisted justice into a product. The defense argued he was just a high-performing executive caught in a political firestorm. The jury didn't buy it. After 5 days of deliberation, the verdict came in, guilty on multiple counts of obstruction, conspiracy, and professional misconduct. Sentenced 18 years without parole. As he was led away, Victor looked at Amir sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom. He didn't speak. He just stared. Amir met his eyes for one long second and then looked away. After the trial, the Department of Justice released a public statement acknowledging systemic vulnerability to retaliation-based abuse and praised the role of external civilian resistance. Amir didn't attend the press conference. He was at a hospital because Nur had just fainted during a community event. Doctors ran tests, blood work, scans. She was fine. They said just overworked, dehydrated, exhausted. Still, Amir sat beside her bed for 12 straight hours. When she woke up, he whispered, "You don't have to carry the world, Habibti. Just carry yourself." She smiled weakly, "But you did both." He kissed her forehead, "And I barely made it." A week later, Elena brought good news. "We got funding," she said. "A private donor. Anonymous. They always are," Amir replied. "But this one's different. He wants to help us open new offices in Chicago, Miami, D.C." Nur clapped softly. Amir nodded. Then paused. "I'm not going." They looked at him. "I'll support it. I'll consult. But I won't lead it. You will." Elena frowned. "Why?" He exhaled. "Because this was never about me. It was about the people no one saw. And now, they're finally being seen. I don't need to be the face anymore." He reached into his coat and pulled out his old ID badge, worn, bent, faded. Amir Dowd, Janitorial Services. He placed it on the desk. "I think this belongs in a museum now." 2 days later, that badge was mounted behind glass. The Museum of Civil Rights and Justice in Washington, D.C. unveiled a new permanent exhibit, Truth and Silence, the story of Amir Dowd. Beside his ID, there was a quote etched in steel: "I didn't speak because I was brave. I spoke because I was tired of sweeping around the lies." But Amir, he didn't attend the ceremony. He was at a community kitchen, handing out lentil soup, nodding gently to each thank you, refusing cameras. The cameras found him anyway. But now, even journalists knew to ask for permission, because respect had replaced pity. And one evening, walking home through soft rain, Nur looked up at him. "Are you happy now?" He thought for a moment, then smiled. "I'm at peace." Same thing. He shrugged. "Close enough." Spring came quietly, the city thawed, and with it, so did the echoes of the chaos that had once consumed Amir's life. No more protests, no more courtrooms, no more surveillance vans on corners. Just New York, blooming in its loud, unfiltered rhythm, and Amir, finally walking without looking over his shoulder. One Sunday morning, he returned to the tower, the same one where it all began. It was under new ownership, now converted into a community center and shared workspace for nonprofits. The security guard at the entrance recognized him immediately. "Sir, you're the guy, right?" Amir smiled, soft. "I was a guy. Now I'm just visiting." The guard grinned and let him in. He walked through the old marble lobby, now filled with murals, photos, and quotes from social justice pioneers, and in the far corner where his mop bucket used to wait there stood a bronze sculpture, a simple janitor's card. Beside it, a plaque to the ones who cleaned the mess long before they were allowed to speak about it. Amir stood there for a long while. No tears, no pride, just a deep, quiet acknowledgement, a bow between past and peace. Meanwhile, Nur had been accepted into 3 universities. She chose New, not because it was prestigious, but because it was close to home. She planned to study international law. Her application essay, titled "Mop Handles and Microphones: How My Father Taught Me That Silence Is Never Neutral." Elena became a legal celebrity. Her TED Talk, "The Day a Janitor Saved My Soul in My Case," had 25 million views. But she still worked long hours at the foundation, still answered her own emails, still met clients face to face. Because she never forgot that her rebirth came not from law school, but from humility, And Amir, he planted a small garden on the rooftop of their apartment building. Tomatoes, mint, lemon balm. Nur laughed, saying it was the most immigrant dad thing he'd ever done. But he liked the quiet rhythm of tending to something that only needed sunlight. And time. No politics. No lies. Just roots. One afternoon, a teacher from a local school asked him to speak to her class. He hesitated at first, but he went. He stood before 28 11-year-olds in plastic chairs and told them about floor wax and integrity, about secrets and responsibility. About seeing things that others ignore and doing something anyway. At the end, a girl raised her hand. Were you scared? He paused. Yes, he said, but not of them. What then? Of becoming like them. The room was quiet. Then one boy stood up and clapped. Soon, the others followed. It wasn't applause for his speech. It was recognition. They saw him, and he saw them. On the walk home, Amir stopped at a corner store, bought a soda, paid in coins. As he left, the young cashier said, "You're the guy from the video, right?" Amir turned. "Which one?" The kid shrugged. "The one where you said justice isn't a system, it's a choice." He smiled. "Yeah, that sounds like something I'd say." The kid grinned. "That was dope." Amir tipped his head, then walked back into a city that had once erased him, and now whispered his name in thank yous and graffiti, because sometimes the greatest revolutions don't come from microphones or megaphones. They come from a mop, a message, and a man brave enough to believe his voice mattered. What did you think of Amir and their story? Share your thoughts in the comments on a scale from 0 to 10. How would you rate this story? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to keep up with all our inspiring stories.